There are mornings in this job when you know before the first case is called that something is going to happen that you will not forget. I cannot always explain how I know. 40 years builds a kind of instinct that resists description, a sensitivity to the temperature of a room, to the particular way certain people carry themselves when they are holding something that matters more than they are letting on, to the small signals that the ordinary machinery of a morning is about to give way to something else entirely. The morning of November 14th was one of those mornings. I walked into my courtroom at 9 and I felt it immediately. Not dread, not tension. Something quieter than either of those things. Something that sat in the air the way certain music sits in a room after it has stopped playing. Present, patient, already complete, waiting only to be understood. My clerk had flagged one file before I went in. She placed it on top of the stack herself, which she does not usually do. She has a system, and the system does not involve her making editorial decisions about the order. She looked at me when she handed me the stack and started to say something and then stopped and said, "Just read the first page, Judge." I took the stack into my chambers. I read the first page. Then I set it down on my desk, and I sat there for a moment before I put on my robe. I do not always do that. That morning I did. The case was filed under an expedited hearing provision that I had invoked perhaps a dozen times in 40 years, a process that exists for circumstances in which the ordinary timeline of the court would render justice meaningless before it could arrive. The request had been submitted by a woman named Carol Briggs, acting as authorized representative for the plaintiff. The plaintiff was her father. His name was Warren Briggs. He was 78 years old. He had served in the United States Army from 1966 to 1969, including 14 months in Vietnam with the 25th Infantry Division. He had been diagnosed with stage 4 lung cancer 8 months before the filing. His oncologist had submitted a supporting letter, precise, clinical, written in the particular careful language that doctors use when they are communicating something irreversible, estimating that Mr. Briggs had between 3 and 6 weeks of functional mobility remaining. After that point, the letter stated, his ability to appear in any public setting would no longer be possible. He had submitted the expedited request 11 days before this hearing. The case itself was a property boundary dispute, a 14-foot strip of land running the length of his backyard. He had the original survey. He had the deed. Both were included in his filing, organized and clearly labeled. The legal question on paper was not complicated. But I understood before I had finished the first page that the legal question was not entirely why Warren Briggs had filed this case. I called the case at 9:22 a.m. Warren Briggs came through the courtroom doors in a wheelchair. His daughter, Carol, was behind him, her hands on the grips, moving with the careful steadiness of someone who had been doing this long enough to know every bump and threshold. She was in her early 50s, dark-haired, with her father's jaw and an expression that was composed in the particular way of people who are holding grief and determination together in the same hand and cannot afford to let either one go. Warren himself was thin in the way that serious illness makes a person thin, not just lighter but somehow clarified, reduced to the most essential version of himself, as though everything that was not strictly necessary had already quietly been let go. His face was angular and deeply lined, the lines deepened further by weight loss, and his hands on the arms of the wheelchair were the hands of a man who had spent his life using them, large-knuckled, spotted with age, entirely still in a way that was not weakness, but the deliberate stillness of someone who has learned that stillness is a form of endurance. His eyes, when he looked up at the bench, were dark brown and completely alert. Whatever the illness had taken from him, it had not touched his eyes. He was wearing a dress shirt, navy blue, ironed, buttoned to the collar with the top button fastened, the kind of dress that requires effort when your hands are unsteady and your mornings are difficult, the kind of effort that is also a statement. On his head, he wore a black cap with gold lettering, Vietnam Veteran. On his left lapel, 2 small pins. I looked at them closely from the bench, a combat infantryman badge, a small gold cross. I greeted him by name. I told him the court appreciated his effort in appearing today. I asked how he was feeling. He said, "Better than I look, Your Honor." There was quiet laughter in the gallery, not nervous, the kind that comes when someone tells a true thing in a way that makes the room feel less heavy. I asked him to tell me about the property dispute in his own words. Carol had a folder of documents on the table in front of her, organized, tabbed. the work of someone who had spent considerable time making sure everything was in order. I told her we would get to those. I wanted to hear from him first. Warren Briggs straightened in his chair, not much, but deliberately the way a man straightens when he is about to speak to someone he respects. He told me that he had lived in his house for 31 years. He and his wife Ruth had bought it in 1993, the year their youngest daughter finished high school, and the year Warren retired from the post office after 26 years of carrying mail through the same neighborhood in every weather the city could produce. He had been a carrier for more than half his working life. He knew every address on his route by heart, he said, and in the early mornings, in the early years, he could walk it half asleep and still not miss a box. They had looked at 11 houses before this one. Ruth had been patient through all of them, careful, attentive, making her notes in the small notebook she carried. Warren said he had been ready to settle on house number 7, but Ruth had said not yet, and he had trusted her because her instincts across 31 years of marriage had been consistently better than his, and he had long since learned to be grateful for that. The 12th house had a backyard with a large flat lawn and a maple tree in the far left corner. It was October when they toured it, and the tree was in full color, deep red fading to amber, the kind of display that only happens for a week or two in the best years, and some years doesn't happen at all. Ruth had walked out the back door and she had stopped. She had not said anything for almost a minute. Then she had turned to the realtor and said, "We'll take it." Warren had signed the papers 3 weeks later. He said he would have signed them that afternoon in the backyard if they'd had a pen. Ruth had died 4 years ago, heart failure, sudden, a Tuesday morning in February. She had been making coffee. He had been in the next room. He did not describe the next room, and I did not ask. He had stayed in the house. His children, Carol and her younger brother David, who had driven up from Maryland and was sitting in the gallery that morning, had suggested gently at first and then with more urgency after his diagnosis that he consider moving somewhere smaller, somewhere easier, somewhere with one of them nearby to help. He had declined every time with the same answer. He was not ready to leave Ruth's tree. They had stopped asking after a while. Carol told me later that they had come to understand eventually that the tree was not a negotiable item and that pushing on it was a way of not understanding what the tree actually was. The boundary dispute had begun 3 years earlier when his neighbor, a man named Gary Poulter, who had moved in 7 years ago and who was now seated at the defendant's table, looking steadily at the floor, had gradually, over the course of several seasons, extended his storage shed and the fencing around his yard to incorporate that 14-foot strip. It had begun with the shed being pushed back, then fence posts appearing, then a concrete pad poured one summer while Warren was in the hospital for a week with a respiratory infection. By the time Warren came home and understood what he was looking at, the concrete was set and the fence was up, and the maple tree was on the wrong side of it. He had tried to resolve it directly. Twice he had gone to Gary Poulter's door with the original survey in his hand. He had laid it on the table and pointed at the line and explained clearly where the boundary was and where the fence was and what the difference between those two things cost him every day. He had been met each time with a particular combination of vague acknowledgement and continued inaction that some people use as a strategy. The quiet bet that if enough time passes, the person asking will either give up or die or both, and the problem will resolve itself without any inconvenience to anyone who matters. Warren had not given up. 3 months after his diagnosis, he had filed here. I looked at Gary Poulter. He was a heavy-set man in his early 50s, thick through the shoulders, wearing a flannel shirt and work boots that told me he had not expected this hearing to require much formality. He had an attorney with him, a local general practitioner, not a specialist, the kind you hire when you believe a matter is routine and you need someone to say the right words in the right order. He sat with his arms crossed and his gaze on the table, which was a posture I had seen many times and which usually meant the person had already decided not to engage with anything that might require him to feel something. I asked Gary Poulter if he disputed the survey. He said, "No, Your Honor," in a voice that tried to make no sound like a reasonable position. I asked if he disputed that the concrete pad and fencing had been placed on the disputed strip. He said, "No, Your Honor," same voice. I asked why, in the 3 years since Warren Briggs had first shown him the survey and walked him to the property line and explained the situation directly to his face, the matter had not been resolved. There was a pause. His attorney started to lean toward him. I held up my hand. I said, "I am asking your client, counselor, not you." Gary Poulter looked at the table. He said there had been costs involved. He said the timing had never been quite right. I let that sit for a moment. The timing had never been quite right. I looked at the expedited hearing request on my desk, the oncologist's letter with its careful language about functional mobility and public appearances, the 11 days between filing and this morning. I said the timing had never been quite right, and then I said, Mr. Poulter, your neighbor filed this case with a medical certificate indicating he may not have the ability to appear in a courtroom again after a matter of weeks. I would like you to consider, before you say anything else, whether there is any version of the timing was never right that accounts for that. Gary Poulter did not say anything. His attorney did not say anything. The courtroom was very quiet. I turned back to Warren Briggs. I asked him why this piece of land mattered enough to be here today. He was quiet for a moment, not uncertain. He had clearly thought about what he wanted to say. He was choosing the words with the deliberateness of a person who understands that he has a limited number of mornings left and does not want to spend any of them imprecisely. He said, Your Honor, the maple tree is on that strip. The courtroom was very still. He said, the 14 feet Gary Poulter fenced off, that is where Ruth's tree is, the one she chose the house for. When he put up that fence, the tree ended up on his side of it. I can see it from my kitchen window, but I cannot get to it. I have not been able to sit under it in 3 years. He stopped. He looked at his hands for a moment. Then he looked back up at me and he said, I know I am not going to be here much longer, Your Honor. I made my peace with that. But I would like to sit under that tree one more time before I go. In my own yard, on my own land. That is what I am asking for. He stopped. The courtroom was completely still. I looked at him. I looked at the navy shirt buttoned to the collar, the Vietnam cap, the 2 small pins, the hands that had gone still. I looked at Carol behind him with her hands still resting on the grips of the wheelchair. I looked at David in the gallery who had driven up from Maryland to be in this room for this morning and who was looking at his own hands in his lap. I have thought about that sentence every day since November 14th, the quietness of it, the complete and total absence of self-pity in a single word of it. He was not asking for justice in any dramatic or public sense. He was not asking for punishment or damages or acknowledgement of anything beyond the simple, bounded, specific thing he needed to sit under his wife's tree one more time in his own yard before he ran out of mornings. That was the complete request. That was what he had gotten himself into, a wheelchair and into a dress shirt and into a car and through those courthouse doors to ask for. I did not wait for him to say anything else. There was nothing else to wait for. I said yes. He looked at me. I think he had expected more process, more back and forth, more of the machinery of a hearing to work through before he got an answer. I said it again, clearly, so the room could hear it. Yes, Mr. Briggs, the court finds in your favor. The survey is unambiguous, the encroachment is undisputed, and the remedy is straightforward. The fence and any structures built on the 14-foot strip must be removed within 15 days at the defendant's expense. The concrete pad must be broken up and removed. The land must be restored to its prior condition, after which, Mr. Briggs, you will be able to reach your tree. Warren Briggs did not say anything immediately. He looked at the table in front of him. His hands, which had been still on the arms of the wheelchair this whole time, turned over slowly so that his palms were facing up, a small, involuntary gesture that I have thought about many times since, like something releasing. Carol put her hand over her father's. She did not speak either. Gary Poulter's attorney was already writing. Gary Poulter himself was looking at the floor with the expression of a man confronting, for the first time, the actual cost of what he had decided the timing was never right to fix. I addressed him directly. I said, Mr. Poulter, I want to make something clear for the record. The legal finding here is simple and the documentation is unambiguous. You encroached on your neighbor's property and you did not correct it when given the opportunity to do so. That is the legal conclusion and it stands on its own. But I also want you to understand something that is not strictly legal. The land you fenced off contained a tree that this man's wife chose 31 years ago. He has not been able to reach it in 3 years. He came to this courtroom today in a wheelchair, in a dress shirt he ironed himself, to ask for access to a maple tree before he dies. That is what your inaction cost him, not the 14 feet, the 3 years. I paused. I said, I hope you think about that when your crew is out there taking down that fence. I hope it takes longer than you'd like and costs more than you budgeted. And I hope every minute of it you are thinking about the man in the house next door who has been watching that tree through a kitchen window since you put the posts in. The courtroom was silent. Then I said, 15 days, Mr. Poulter, not 16. I recessed for 10 minutes after that. I went to my chambers and I stood at the window for a while without sitting down, and I thought about Ruth Briggs choosing a house because of a tree. I thought about what it means to love someone for so many decades and so completely that after they are gone, the things they loved become something that cannot be explained to anyone who has not felt it themselves. The tree was not the tree. The tree was Ruth. The tree was 31 years of Tuesday mornings and a backyard chosen in October because she had walked out a door and stopped and looked up and said, we'll take it, and meant something larger than the house by that. Warren Briggs had stayed in that house for 4 years after February because he was not ready to leave her. And then someone had put a fence between him and her tree. And the 3 years since then had been 3 years of looking at it through a kitchen window and not being able to reach it. I thought about what that looks like from the inside, how small and specific and unbearable that particular kind of loss is, not the large loss, the one that came in February, but this secondary one, quieter and harder to explain, the loss of the last thing you had left. When I came back out, the gallery had thinned to perhaps a dozen people. A few had cases of their own later in the morning. A few had no reason to stay, but had stayed anyway, the way people sometimes do when they understand they are in the presence of something that matters and they are not ready to walk away from it yet. Carol was helping her father with his coat. The tabbed folder was back in her bag, no longer needed. As they turned toward the door, Warren Briggs looked back at me from his wheelchair. The Navy shirt, the Vietnam cap, the 2 small pins, his hands still. He said, "Thank you, Your Honor." I said, 15 days, Mr. Briggs. You will have your tree back in 15 days. He held my gaze for a moment, then he nodded, one slow, deliberate nod, the kind that means more than agreement. And Carol pushed the chair forward, and they went through the door, and it swung closed behind them. 3 weeks later, my clerk told me that Gary Poulter's crew had finished on day 13. She had ways of finding things out that I did not ask about. The fence was down. The concrete was broken up and gone. The strip of land was clear. She also told me that Carol had called. Warren had been to the tree twice in the week since the fence came down. The second time, Carol had brought a folding chair out for him, and he had sat under it for almost 2 hours on a cold November afternoon with a blanket over his lap. When she had looked out the kitchen window to check on him, his eyes were closed and his face was tilted up into the branches. I have thought about that image many times since November. A man in a folding chair under a maple tree in November with his face tilted up, eyes closed, after 3 years, after everything. I do not know how much time Warren Briggs had after that afternoon. I did not ask, and Carol did not say. What I know is that he got back to the tree. That is what I know, and it is enough. I am telling you this story because of what Warren Briggs asked for and because of what he did not ask for. He did not ask for an apology. He did not ask for damages or acknowledgement or any reckoning with the 3 years Gary Poulter had decided the timing was never right to fix. He asked for 14 feet of land and 1 tree and the simple ability to sit under it before he ran out of mornings. That is the ask. The complete, entire, bounded ask of a man who had carried a rifle in Vietnam at 20 years old and carried mail through winter for 26 years and carried a grief too large to explain since a Tuesday morning in February. He had carried all of it quietly, and he had come to this courtroom in a wheelchair in a Navy shirt to ask for the last thing he needed. I said yes before he finished the sentence. I have been on this bench for 40 years. I have learned that the cases which stay with you are not always the ones involving the largest sums or the most complicated facts. They are the ones where what is at stake is so clear, so human, so simply and plainly correct that the whole weight of the bench and 40 years of process reduces down to a single word that a person needs to hear before it is too late. Sometimes the job is just saying yes. Sometimes the only thing that matters is being fast enough to say it. I was fast enough on November 14th. I am glad of that. I will always be glad of that. If this story reached something in you today, if it made you think about the trees in your own life, the things and the people you have been meaning to get back to, do not wait. Subscribe to this channel because there are more stories like this one and I am not finished telling them. And leave me a comment. Tell me about someone who asked for something small and should have been heard sooner. Tell me their name. People like Warren Briggs deserve to be remembered long after the fence comes down.